Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Dharmica Mistry and I'm head of Medtech here at Cicada Innovations. First up, we have Ingenuity Design. So they're talking about starting with design, and we have the CEO and director, Paul Moutzouris, and senior electronics engineer and medical device specialist, John Paul McKeown. Right now and hand it over to you guys. So take it away.
Hi guys, I'm Paul and I'm CEO of Ingenuity, and we have JP here, our senior medical device engineer, and we're going to be talking to you about medical device design. Our motto at Ingenuity is to create better together. We love to create to make a better world. And what better way to do that than by developing medical devices? Medical devices have a special quality of being able to impact lives in a really positive way, whether it's diagnosing or whether it's maintaining or treating or curing illnesses. It can result in a better quality of life and ultimately a longer life. So we have our loved ones around for longer and can enjoy them even more. So with that, we get really excited about medical device design, but it isn't always easy. How do we go about designing great products that are designed properly, that actually produce a positive outcome for the world, but also for the companies that are also developing them? There's a lot of pitfalls. On the surface, it can sometimes seem easy. Here's a product that you can buy off Alibaba for literally $10. It's actually a nebulizer. What it does is you put a dosage of medicine in it, it atomizes that medicine and basically spits it out into your face, so for absorption, into your nose for absorption into the sinuses.
I think you're presenting.
Oh, hold on one second. I'm not presenting. Here we go. You're probably seeing that now. So as I was saying, this nebulizer basically releases medicine into your nose for absorption into the sinuses. It sounds very simple, but there's a lot of things that can go wrong. For example, there's performance claims. If you're thinking about this product, what happens if it administers the medicine too quickly? Well, the medicine runs down the back of your throat, and as a result, you don't absorb it into the body. Now, if it's saline, it's not a problem, but if it's your heart medication, that can result in a big issue. It could actually result in you not getting the dosage you require. So the performance requirements need to be verified. They need to be substantiated by scientific evidence. There's a process that needs to be done to ensure that that product performs correctly. But even if it performs correctly, what happens if it leaks water? That water could result in a current path to the patient. So in medical devices, they really do restrict the leakage currents. There's also isolations, voltage isolations that are required to keep patients safe. If the product leaks and that results in a short circuit, or if there's exposed metal parts that connect to the circuit, it can result in potential harm for a patient. So all of these things need to be designed properly. But even if it's designed properly, it could be misused. What happens if, for example, that power supply on the right-hand side, that's what you're relying on for your leakage and isolation control. What happens if it's swapped out? You can see it's got just a DC barrel jack in that picture. I could use my laptop supply. In that case, that defeats the protections of the product. So immediately, how that product is used, how it's designed, all are important considerations for design. In addition, the product itself could fail. That product there could have a component failure, which results in it giving an incorrect dosage. All of these things result in consequences. Consequences for the companies that are selling those, because the TGA regulates this and wants to make sure that products deliver positive health outcomes. If that product doesn't achieve that health outcome, if there's a problem, it can result in product recalls, suspensions of ability to sell. But in addition, it can actually result in lives being damaged, in people being hurt by hazards. So it's imperative that we design products properly. And that's what we're here to talk to you about today. In terms of our development process, there's a standard development process that you might follow. There's really good reasons for staging a development process. One is to provide checks and counterbalances through the course of the development. But with medical devices, there's so many more steps. We're not going to go through everything, and this is by no means exhaustive. But as an overview, there's obviously some design that happens in the early stages, making sure your business is designed properly, making sure it's funded properly, making sure your business case is substantiated, that you have an IP protection strategy. We're not covering that today, but once the foundations of the businesses are laid, you really want to move into that concept development phase. And this is where you lay the foundations of the design. It's critical, like any planning of anything you're going to build, to get that plan right. How are you going to deliver a safe product? What are the requirements? What standards apply? What is the product going to be used for? What is critical to its success, both for the patient and for the company? How is it going to be used? All of these questions need to be addressed up front. And only when those questions are addressed do you move into design. You can obviously rush in, but then you'll need to come back, and it can actually result in more work than doing it correctly from the beginning. You implement the design. We're not going to actually cover this part of the design because many people are familiar with this, designing electronics and software and doing industrial design and prototyping. But once that product is being prototyped, we then need to verify, we need to validate it. We need to ensure that the requirements that we set out, which were critical to the product success, are actually proven to be correct, that the product is usable. And we need to ensure that no requirements have been dropped. And that's where traceability comes through. This is critical for great product design, for ensuring that requirements aren't missed, for ensuring that mistakes aren't made. And ultimately, this results in a design file which documents your design, which we call the DHF, and a master record, which is actually used for documenting the design for production. At that point, you begin to hand over to production to start doing pilots and volume. And Entech's going to talk a bit about that later on. But this whole process is governed by quality standards. You'll notice up in the right-hand side here, 13485. It's important, it's essential that you're certified, that this design process is certified to 13485. And what it's concerned about is the quality of the management process that governs this design process. Document control, revision control, making sure that documents don't have mistakes, that they're not incorrectly used, ensuring that they're properly design reviewed, ensuring that there's traceability, that requirements are carried through, validated. When they are verified and validated, that you're using the correct equipment that's calibrated, that your suppliers are correctly certified themselves, that you've actually onboarded them correctly into your process. And ultimately, this 13485 governs the quality process itself. How are you going to manage quality, and what are you going to ensure that your process, if there are issues that come up, how are they going to be rectified and make sure that we don't drop those requirements? Finally, 13485 extends beyond design into production and ultimately into the post-market surveillance, which is how you manage your product and ensure that any non-conformities are dealt with by going back into the design process. Today, I'm going to hand over to JP, who is going to do a bit of a deep dive into some of these tasks in blue that you can see we've highlighted. It's not exhaustive, but will give you an insight into what goes into producing medical devices.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, just a quick one on the regulatory basis of your product development. You want to have a reg plan in place, and there's lots of 3-letter acronyms and 5-digit standards that you may be already aware of. So obviously, if you're going to America, it's the FDA. You've got the MDR coming up for Europe, TGA for Australia, 510K, PMA, all of these things. What we would say is, in short, for this presentation, go and get yourself a good regulatory consultant to do this for you. But some of the things that you can bear in mind from a design perspective to help you in this is the classification of your medical device will depend on some criteria, such as time in or on the body, whether it transfers energy in or out of the body. A lot of it depends on the claims that you're making, whether it's diagnostic or therapeutic. How does the performance function? Whether any accessories are located within the patient environment, defined as 1.5 meters from the bed in Europe or 6 feet in the States. Whether it's a medical device or an in vitro diagnostic device, it falls under different regulations. So there's a lot to consider there. And if we move on, we can see the classes, the consequences are, it depends whether you're going to need to do a more in-depth audit for something like a class 3 or for just a class 1. You can self-register in the ARTG and you don't need as much of an in-depth audit on your tech file. You just need to hold one should it be required. So there are standards that apply, international harmonized standards. For medical electrical devices in particular, there's one which applies called 60601. It has base and collateral standard components to it. The collateral, some of which apply if it's pertinent. So home use, for example, if it's to be used at home or clinical use. Then you've got particular standards which address particular usages and technologies. And out of the base standard, there is one which drives software. There's a whole other standard called 62304, which governs the process by which you develop your software. 60601-1-6 calls out for usability, another standard called 62366. So it's a bit of a cascade to be aware of. And overarching all of this, there's 13485, which Paul mentioned, and 14971 for managing risk. This would be your hazards analysis, your DFMEAs, and your risk management plan and report. There's a lot more besides things like sterility, but we're going to short for time today, so we'll just say that all these standards exist. You need to bear them in mind. Now, what process do the regulators want to see you using to document this type of activity? Well, this classic waterfall diagram from the FDA demonstrates how user needs, which are sort of a high-level fluffy description of what the product does for the users, gets validated by, you get your final medical device and see if it actually meets those user needs. They call that designing the right product. And then verification is the check on your lower level specifications, make sure that you design the product right. These are much more objective and measurable and sort of technological and engineering based. Traceability between all those things is essential. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. So moving on then to the user needs. What does an actual user need when it's written down look like? Well, here's an example of an SpO2 meter for an infant. So it's heart rate and oxygen saturation. You can start off, a good place to start off is defining the statement of intended use. Also the application specification, which is a very generic term for where it's being used and who's going to use it, what parts of the body, the environment that it goes into. But the actual text of a user need should be, I believe, written from the point of view of the actual users themselves. So you want to say something like, the operators need to be able to leave the immediate vicinity of the patient and have access to the measurement data when they return, in the case of the baby and the carer. When that's translated into a lower level specification that you can actually design from, this is kind of the type of thing that it should look like. First of all, it's traceable back to that original user need. It itself is uniquely identifiable and has a testable and unambiguous description. It's justified with some justification. It could well lead on to lower level requirements, but it's sort of, what it doesn't do is direct the design. So it doesn't say that it should be 1 megabyte of memory. It just says that it's put in terms of what it means to the actual users, but it's still testable. So it's 1 month's worth of time-stamped event records, for example, is what it can store. Okay, so verification when it does occur, it could be in-house whenever you're testing this kind of memory storage capacity, but it could also be an external test house, such as an EMC testing facility in the anechoic chamber that's shown here, where you blast it with radio waves and make sure it doesn't fall over or it doesn't emit too much as well. You've got electrostatic discharge testing with the 15 kilovolts. It'll be zapped into it and make sure it doesn't fall over as well. Now, validation is where you try to put it into the hands of users or people who represent the users in the actual environment. This is an example of another type of mesh nebulizer, which is handheld and battery powered. So if we go into the next one, you can see how this ties into your usability. So 62366, as I mentioned, is also known as human factors engineering in the States. You want to do formative evaluations as an early mock-up and document everything you can. People miss that opportunity often. And then the validation occurs at the end where you do summative evaluations with representative users in a representative scenario. You want to consider things like alarm fatigue and attention deficit as well. The documents that you'll need to submit at the end of it are related to your design history file, the flow of the project development as it stood, but it will also take the form of a device master record, which is the recipe needed to reproduce the device, and will flow into your technical file. Post-market surveillance and clinical evaluation are also key for that. So I'm going to try and speed myself up a bit. You've got different routes to market in the key markets that everybody is generally interested in. Could be 510K. It can cost roughly about $10,000 and take between 3 and 24 months to get through, depending on the classification and complexity. The European route is a bit cheaper and quicker, but it's going to change the MDR very shortly, or basically it's already changed, but has a grace period extension. And then TGA submission is you can get that off the back of your EU. That's the easiest way to go rather than direct to TGA. Again, 10K in about 3 months. So just moving on to just one example of a medical device which we worked on, and it's probably known to many people in the audience, where it's sold in many jurisdictions around the world. I think 24,000 of the Trophon 2 have been hit the market already, and it's an example of where if you get all of this right, it can end up being a commercial success for the company and an example of a good design winner for the design team involved. So with that, I'll probably hand back to Paul for a summary.
Yeah, so this is just touching on things, and you can see here the complexity of just even those small tasks there in the design process, and it can be sometimes overwhelming what needs to be achieved to develop a medical product. Obviously, you have two choices. One is to do it in-house. So if you did, the requirements would be to follow a 13485 compliant QMS for design, so quality management system for design. If you're doing software, you do need to deal with 62304, which is fairly extensive. The benefit there is if you're building that in-house capability, you're designing the product correctly, if you're following that process and you're building your own capability. The other alternative is to outsource to a consultancy. And the advantages and the thing there is to make sure that it has an approved 13485 process. If you don't, you're going to come back and have to redesign it, and it's a lot more expensive to try to fix it later. And you want a design company that has the right capabilities that cover all the disciplines that are required for that product and a proven track record with medical device development. The benefits of this, of the consultancy model, is that it is lower cost in terms of setup. You don't need to build all those internal capabilities. And ultimately, you're leveraging off the experience and existing intellectual property, as in design, reusable design aspects within that organization. And obviously, the project, once it wraps up, you only have to pay for what you use. You're not carrying ongoing overhead. And that can be really important for startups, which often don't have the capital to invest in building those capabilities from the ground up, which is quite an extensive thing to do. So basically, that's it from us. We've just touched on things. Let us know if you've got any questions later on.
We'll hand back to Dharmica.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, John Paul. That was great. I might ask a really quick question before we move on. I guess when you're talking about design thinking, you talked about collecting data for, validating an idea, but can you talk really quickly, and we can go through it at the end as well, again, if you have some more points, but about the different touch points of different stakeholders in medtech, because it's not always just the end user. There are a lot of other people that need to play a role. Should you be collecting that data in the very same way?
Well, I mean, yes, it's very rare that it's the patient that pays for the device in medical. So you have a lot of stakeholders you need to consider, buyers, users, cleaners, as well as the clinicians. So I suppose, from the perspective of human-centered design, it should incorporate all of those people's desires and needs. But, the same process doesn't necessarily need to be followed. So like usability from a medical device perspective is really focused on safety. It doesn't really mind as too much about how good it feels, and so that's a very important thing to get for commercial success. So I would say it's a slightly different process for all the other extended stakeholders.
Thank you. Thank you both. We're going to keep moving and we'll have more time for Q&A at the end. So all those questions in the chat, keep them coming. We will get to as many as we can. So next up, let's talk medical device manufacturing in Australia, especially with regards to the current COVID-19 situation. So the supply chain strategy, I guess, Yaser is going to talk to us from Entech Electronics. So he's the General Manager of Sales Strategy and Development in APAC and EU. Take it away, Yaser.
Thanks, Dharmica, for the time and the opportunity here. Without wasting any time, Entech Electronics is electronics contract manufacturer. We do both PCBA and complete box build. We have been manufacturing medical device among all the others for past 35 years, I would say. We have our headquarters in Adelaide with a team of 130, 40 people at the moment, and then our offshore facility, which we have over 250 people there. I would like to start with the main message for today. When you're talking about medical device, when you're talking about development and manufacturing, the landscape is significantly changing, and it is a load of work and success. It depends on the partner that any startup or innovator is choosing. And we would like to say that the selection of the partner is the most important for certain number of factors, which I'm going to highlight in this presentation. We believe the most important factor that any startup or innovator need to consider is to have as many possible partners as they can have. And in selecting those partners, they need to find people that they believe in that partnership, and they themselves have several partners, which I will explain this again. When we want to manufacture something, it's not just about the certification. 13485, it's very important certification for the medical device, but and anyone can manufacture under the certification your medical device. But what is important these days is the speed to manufacture. The quality, of course, is important. At what cost and what level of risk your product is going to be manufactured. And what if you need to scale your production? Now you're thinking about 1,000 unit or 5,000 unit or 50 unit, and that is a great success for you. But what if suddenly you need to manufacture tens of thousands? And that transition may stop you for a very long time. So that the speed to scale also is extremely important. And especially what we saw during the COVID-19, the pressure that the medical device manufacturer went into was significant. And some of them succeed because they could scale, and some of them failed, and the disruption in the whole supply chain and manufacturing hurt them significantly. It was a survey by Jabil. Jabil is probably one of the biggest electronics contract manufacturer in the world. They have over 100 production plants in 37 different in 20 different countries in the world, which 37 of these production plants are in Asia. They did a survey with 700 largest supply chain decision maker among the customers that they're serving. And the result is shown here. The two of the main points which I took from that survey: 40% of the decision makers are adjusting their sourcing partnership. This is due to the COVID-19. 30% expanding their EMS partnership. 53% are looking to manufacturing partner, which it means they used to do it themselves before, but now they want to just outsource it to outside. And in terms of what they're outsourcing, it is interesting. They're outsourcing innovation, they're outsourcing security of the supply chain, the risk that they're taking, the corporate social responsibility, and also whatever they can do in terms of cost saving and DFM. They're outsourcing all of this. This is all the impact of COVID. And now I'm going back to that partnership model and that manufacturing importance in terms of partners that you're going to select. There are a few factors that, of course, we are saying that in today's day, no one has all the answer. It is extremely big market with lots of variable, and every day these things are changing. When we are disrupted with the pandemic or any sort of unprecedented situation, you can't survive if you do not have the timely information and visibility on what is happening. There are things like regulatory, there are things in terms of connectivity, connection, components of supply, and like distribution and design of your product, and having all of this information together. So you need, as an innovator, as a startup, you need to be able to integrate to all of these factors. It's not just about the idea of how to design your product. It's about the availability. It's about the speed. And it is important to have the experts that they're available locally and they're next to you. They can communicate with you, but they have the footprint globally, and they can update you on the information and the activities around the world. One example which I wish to highlight, of course, in this product development cycle, we strongly suggest that anyone's focus on the supplier relationship. We are from manufacturing background. We see the disasters that can happen if you make a decision on any supply chain related topics a bit late. There are lots of factors that need to be considered into the design, and the partner can evolve with you. If your forecast is that you have a connected device which is going to be connected to Apple platform, for example, Apple MFI is something that need to be considered from very early stage of design, not just for your design. Your manufacturer need to be certified. And this is not something that the manufacturer need to be certified. Factory is not like a 13485 certification. For each specific product, the manufacturer need to certify for Apple MFI like chip for that product, and they need to communicate with the designer and the product owner to be able to be ready for that like certification. Again, innovation, manufacturing, and supply chain is extremely connected ecosystem. You need to consider all of that. When we are talking about DFM and DFT, design for manufacturing, design for test, is not just about the shape of your device anymore. It's not about the how you're putting it together. Of course, you're going to save lots of costs considering all of this. But one of the very important factors now, and especially post-COVID, is availability, is the risk that you have in selection of each of your component, the location of each of these supplier, the dual source or multiple source selection of the component. What if one of my factory went down, one of my supplier is not able to supply this part to me? Is that all the 200 other parts in my total bill of material going to be on hold because I'm not having one of the parts? This is something that in the DFM we strongly suggest that you consider, and we are helping our client to consider all of that. Modular design is extremely important. Again, if there is a disruption and you can't, let's say, get certain product or a certain part of your product, can you just drop the whole thing, maybe 10% of your design? Can you drop it and replace it with something else and keep the rest of the 90% of your design? These are important issues which existed for several years, but now the whole medical device or even the electronic or product manufacturing are considering that. The other important issue is the timely, when we are talking about the resilience and agility in supply chain, is all about visibility. Is not the geographical location of the production plant or the supply chain is important, but it's not as important as it is to know what is happening at every second in your supply chain. It was a fire in this factory in Japan in October. We got notified by our partner within days that there is going to be a disruption in certain connectivity module. We could alert some of our suppliers, which they were related to this factory, in a timely basis. We can see the impact of that fire in October now in January, but we already gave warning to some of our partners. And I wish to wrap it up here and pass to you, Dharmica. Is there any question?
Yeah, I have a quick one. So if in Australia, in relation to manufacturing, are there areas that we can be more competitive that you see?
Of course, we can be more competitive. We strongly believe that the pandemic, to be honest, maybe helped us to be more competitive because the whole planning, the whole supply, when we are talking about competition, there is a cost and there is a speed. So automation is helping a lot to Australian to be able to be more cost sensitive, and we are competing with some of the global manufacturer now. I'm talking about Entech. There's a particular product, a medical device that now we are manufacturing in Adelaide. We are manufacturing 500,000 per month of that specific medical device, and we are extremely competing with the offshore production. We've been able to bring not lots of, maybe 4 major projects from offshore back to Australia, and it was because of the risk factor. And that risk is coming as a very important ticket into the whole supply chain and manufacturing consideration. So we can reduce labor, we can be smart in the design. People like Ingenuity Design and other good design houses in Australia, they're coming extremely competitive in the way that they're improving the design. And if you have a good manufacturing or good supply chain strategy, of course, we can be competitive.
Thank you very much. I'll let you keep going.
Thanks. Here I wish to share a couple of case study. The one that I can share the name, of course, is Raspberry, because we have permission from them to share this project. It was a good, successful story for us. I love to share this story. We got to know them in March 2019. It was the beginning of the pandemic. Everyone, they were scared. We were very worried that how we are going to run our business, to be honest. Is that lots of customers going to be disrupted, and what is going to happen the whole supply chain? We got to know them. They wanted to reduce cost of their product. They have done a good design, couple of good design house in Australia that were involved. They had a good manufacturing partner. They have had a trial run. It was almost ready. The project was going for a few years. And then they engaged with us. The only way to reduce cost was to make some adjustment into that design. And we could help them. They had a very good design team. That design team came very handy. Our manufacturing, design for manufacturing team in Australia and also in China, they could provide lots of timely information very fast on the weekly basis. We had meetings. We were auditing new supplier for them. In China, of course, we have like a good supply chain team over there. And with the help and communication between Melbourne, Adelaide, and Shenzhen, we could reduce a significant part of the cost in this project. And that was not just on the electronic. This is important. The plastic is important. How you put the parts together is important. The new machines that can do like the complete assembly in a faster way is also important. So this is a good example of what we could do without meeting a client, without sitting together with them in one room and go through the design document. This is the effect of the COVID-19, that everyone started practicing to work together remotely. And it was a good experience for us to see how much we can reduce traveling, how much we can reduce different way of communication and achieve a good cost down. The importance of this relationship, some of them is of course is about the intelligence which we can share from that global supply chain. Is of course we were advising customer that how they can select their component, how they can select their material, but at the same time we could tell them, don't choose this part, don't go this path, because there will be lead time, there will be issue of delivering this part from this area to that area. We could give all of this input and help them to achieve their product launch. And that was important. The other thing which I wish to highlight is not just about the medical device. I think In the past, medical device, it was like, or even aviation, it was something very different from any other products. But now with IoT, with connectivity, I think IoT is everything. Medical device is an IoT device. Everything is a small, it's just a point of connectivity and transferring some data, and visibility into lots of other design and manufacturing consideration can help to improve the speed of product launch for the medical device. And what's maybe the innovators are not that concerned. They're too busy with lots of other factors into the design and innovation. But when it comes to the market, to the product launch, commercial challenge and battles, the investors are really looking into a very secure and a stable supply chain. And like as a result, 7th of September, Respiri announced their partnership with Entech, and immediately, I think the same day or the next day, their share price increased, and that was significant. There are a few other factors. I can't mention the name of some of the good customers that we have in Australia and New Zealand, which we help them with the hybrid production. I mean, this is the option that in the design and innovation need to be considered. Can I be cost competitive in 100% of my product, or should I consider doing the hybrid model, part of it here, part of it offshore, part of it in this estate and part of it in the other estate in Australia? So all these factors need to be considered. Automation is important. How much your manufacturing partner can automate the products, and whether this is the vision or they already have the equipment. Is this an existing plant or the plant that need to be built in the future? Example, and the currency exchange rate is important. Is like manufacturing partner can reduce the risk of currency for all the parts, whether it's a mechanical part or electronics. Are they able to help you in that regard, which we help to some of our clients, and that enable them to compete with the offshore competitors that they had. And this is another challenge, a very big challenge for Australian company. Risk consideration, I put the case here. This is important when we are talking about manufacturing. Now everyone's talking about local production. That is important, that is great, and that is exactly what Entech is trying to do as an Australian company. But what if there's a disaster in Australia, which is not anywhere else in the world? Touch wood, but did anyone imagine the COVID-19 can disrupt us the way that it did? And what if the bushfire last year was going more aggressive and was hurting more industry in Australia? If the fire go to your production plant in Australia, what is the plan B? You know, we need to be like vigilant on any possibility. And again, I'm talking about investors. They are considering all of this. So it is good to have multiple locations for production. While we are investing and pushing the local industry, it's good to consider what if anything goes wrong in plan A or plant A. And the case of Samsung, which they were hit by COVID-19 and they could move their production. Of course, as a Korean company, Samsung didn't want to move that, but they pushed their production to Vietnam to like fight with the COVID disruption that they had. This is just a brief summary of Entech, who we are, a medical device certified manufacturer, and we have a good team in Australia and offshore. We love to build it in Australia, and we leverage everything, every resources that we have offshore to enable the Australian companies to compete with the global competitor. Back to you, Dharmica.
Thank you, Yaser. That was fantastic. And I can see all the questions coming through on the side. I can see that Ingenuity have answered some of the Ingenuity ones. So I might throw straight to you while I've got you online and ask one of the ones that are here. So it's from Kirti. She's asking, could you please share your thoughts on Medtech integration with fabrics, so smart fabrics, And what would be the outlook for smart fabric supply chain in Australia? So I might throw to you first, Yaser.
Well, thanks, Dharmica. The smart fabric is very interesting area. We have been involved in few projects. We are researching ourselves is new area, and we are somehow relying on the good design houses like Ingenuity and others that they are also looking into this new technology. When is fabric involved, so that is not something that Australia is like we can say we are a big manufacturer, so there are different aspects of it, but it's the niche area. We can be more we are going to hear more about it. I can't disclose projects that is happening here in Australia, but it is a good area, and Australia can be competitive in manufacturing a good, unique niche product.
Thank you. Do Ingenuity have any comments on that one?
I mean, there's a few projects that we've sort of got in the works as well, but it depends on the application. So, if you make medical claims that the fabric's going to be able to sense a particular, say like a pressure sore in a bed or something like that, you have to be able to back up your claims. So, I think the clinical evidence is still to be gathered on that particular technology.
Thank you. I guess, let me see, there's so many. Where do we start up here? So somebody's asking here, Laura, as a team that have an idea for a medical device, she's asking whether a proof of concept is really required before you go out and pitch for funding, or can you just have literature support for an idea?
I'd love to go at that one. Look, I think that ultimately you want to design products that the market wants. And there's a lot of reasons for doing proof of concept. So there's a thing called lean startup where you do some rapid prototyping, do some concepts and actually see how your users interact with the product and get feedback. I think that kind of stuff is really invaluable. So, you can do some rapid prototyping to produce some low fidelity prototypes that get you some answers quickly. And that can save you, because a number of times I've seen people go in, develop a product, try to get it to market, and the first user that gets it is kind of like, well, I actually don't like this product, or it doesn't do exactly what I want. I really want it to do something different or something in a different way. So I think rapid prototyping and for market validation is a really good step. It's not essential, but I would almost think it should be.
I would agree with you. I think it is essential. And I think you also need to validate your market, but also the size of the opportunity. So I think that's a very valid point.
I wish to add, sorry, I 100% agree with what Paul mentioned. And the other thing is that when you do the prototype and then you show that prototype, the design of it to a manufacturer, they can tell you a little bit of the direction that, the functionality and validation and market situation is something that the startup need to study. But whether that prototype is going to a good direction, that if you want to do a manufacturing in a scale, we can bring lots of intelligence and input and like direction to the design of the actual project after that. So it helps. It definitely helps in various ways.
Sure. They call it an ugly baby, build your ugly baby. And I think a lot of people do that here. We've got a rapid prototyping facility here in Cicada, and a lot of the initial building is done in-house, and then they usually reach out and start talking to people like yourselves. Somebody else has asked a question here about learnings on user experience with medical devices. So the challenges around presenting back the user data in an understandable way, users' learning curves with devices that are innovative. So tools and measures that you've got to make this process, which is really important, easier for everybody.
So how do you, just to clarify there, it's presenting back the user's input, is that what you mean?
Yep, that's right.
So obviously, yeah, I mean, if you could spend years talking to users and not getting any useful information from it, I think the key thing is to have a hypothesis before you go in that you're actually going to test. And it's not like, would you like to buy this product? It's more like, does this actually address a pain point for you or a particular clinical need? So I think cutting through the noise in that sense is best done with a structured, sort of hypothesis proving approach, first of all. And then how you present it back. I mean, you can do it in the form of presentations or usability formative studies is a really good way to do a 3D print and put it back in the hands to confirm your assumptions.
Awesome, thank you.
Does that answer it?
Yeah, that makes absolute sense to me. We've got another one on manufacturing. So could you please share with us the benefits of manufacturing in Australia versus China? What are the benefits of offshore medical production? We've already talked about how we can be more competitive. And the second part to that question is, are you experiencing any pushback from buyers and large distributors around Chinese produced medical products? So is there any impact from all of this? And you might have touched upon some of this already, but maybe there are a couple of other points, Yaser. And if JP and John Paul want to add anything, go for gold.
In terms of benefits of manufacturing in Australia, the first thing is why not? If the concern is cost, we can compete. I'm not saying we can 100% compete, but we are closing the gap significantly. If the concern is the access to global infrastructure, that is something that likes of us, we are trying to narrow that gap, by having offshore office, a supply chain office that can support the local team in Australia, whether doesn't matter which state we are here in Australia, we can narrow that gap. So yes, when we are talking about any product manufacturing, whether it's medical or not, the main thing, ultimate goal is to reduce it at a competitive cost. So once we are able to be competitive, we definitely encourage anyone to do it in Australia. In terms of capability, we need to manufacture things here to be able to feed our engineering experts, to be able to feed our design houses, and they can see the way that products is being manufactured, so they can bring that idea into designing something else. We have some of the best universities in the world here, and especially in Melbourne, which I'm here, 8 of the top universities of the world are here. So we have the resources which we need. We just need to collaborate, and that's one point. In terms of the pushback for China, which you mentioned, or any other offshore production, I think China, India, Southeast Asia, they are all being treated the same. Mexico, East Europe, there's always lots of competition. But no, we are not seeing any pushback at the moment, and we are just securing our customer to enable them to get their product.
Thank you. Thank you. There's another question here about the cost of development and registration. So can that be covered with grants, or is this mostly out of pocket? And maybe Ingenuity can answer to that one.
R&D incentive is a good place to start. You've got non-dilutive grants that are in various jurisdictions that are relevant as well. The New South Wales Medical Device Fund is obviously a big one, and there's lots of smaller ones as well. I mean, take whatever you can get. Take whatever funding is available. It's I suppose it overlaps with what Paul talks about sometimes, but it's.
Yeah, I mean, there's commercialization grants, there's specific grants for medical devices, and I know the government's very supportive of manufacturing in Australia as well, and there's a lot of grants around that. So, and there's also specific grants, particular states. So it's a very complex answer. It's not one that we could probably go into detail here, but definitely many of our clients have got funding. We assist them in sometimes securing that funding and also just getting the product to a point where they can actually attract investors as well, and also attract. Many of those grants do need to show some capability as well. It's not just a case of walking in with an idea. In fact, it's rarely that. You often have to show some kind of business acumen and some underlying market surveillance and some business cases to actually secure money.
Yeah, and obviously the best case scenario is if you can actually sell an MVP to a client. That's your best kind of demonstration of traction as well.
Just to add on.
Yeah, on the manufacturing side, I was going to ask you.
Yeah, I'm going to say Cicada is a good place to answer this, better than us. And, but at the same time, AMGC is very active. manufacturing modernization fund. We have few good clients that they're going for that manufacturing modernization fund, and they are a medical device companies. There are other funds, and that's a good thing about Australia. I'm not saying we have lots of money compared to what we see in Singapore, what we see in US, but we have a small ecosystem which we are very close to each other. And there are certain good funds available which it easily can be searched and discovered. But the main thing I want to say is not important. The money is easy to come. The way that you are spending it as a startup is
software 100% failure.
And again, I want to emphasize on this partnership, like Ingenuity, the design houses, the consultant, the BSI as a regulatory, for example, the other experts that we see them in Australia, talk to them, and instead of just spending money quickly, just find the good partner that they can help you to spend it wisely.
Gotcha. Thank you. I think I've only got time for one more before we have to wrap up. I'm going to ask one that's talking about user feedback on an unregulated prototype. So we've been talking a lot about rapid prototyping and creating things. Can you do that? Can you collect data on an unregulated product? And also somebody else has asked, and this is kind of, I guess comes hand in hand. What are some of the rapid prototyping processes that are used? So maybe you can both have a go at answering that, both parties.
Yeah, I'll jump in first. I mean, yeah, there is a misconception that you need to have, a fully certified sellable medical product before you can go and use it or test it on patients. I mean, there is such an idea of doing a clinical evaluation with the benefit of an ethics committee approval for a particular location. The device that you use for that trial ideally would have as many certifications as you could manage, maybe a bit of 60601 verification if you have the time and the money, but ultimately it's down to the decision of the ethics committee. If it's a very low risk device and it's class 1 and it's not electronics, well, you can probably just go ahead and they'll approve it pretty quick. How you get made, yeah, I mean, fast prototype is obviously a way to go. Yaser can comment on what's the safest way to do it.
In terms of those regulatory and the data collection, I'm not an expert in that area, but in terms of having a fast prototype, I can comment that if the components are going to be available in a short period of time, putting together a complete product, not just electronic, is not a big challenge. I think it depends on what is the product. It can be achieved within weeks, if like not few months. And we are not just us, our partners that we have and other players in the market, they're trying to reduce the prototype time. So yeah, it wouldn't be a drama, but whether that prototype needs to be regulated, I don't know.
Thank you, everyone. I am going to start to wrap up now because I know you guys are online some more. Thank you to all of you for joining us today and have a fabulous afternoon. Thank you, everyone.